Hi, welcome to another Cozy Coven Chats. I'm your host, Jenny Seabell. And today I'm bringing to you my very first guest ever on the podcast, Caroline Hall. And when I began this podcast, my hope was that my very first guest would be someone in our coven. But I didn't know that my first guest would be someone in our coven and also a podcast coach. So tell me if that's not the perfect first guest for any podcaster. It definitely is. For those of you who are not already familiar with her, Caroline Hull is a podcast strategist, coach, and voice keeper for women in business. She helps coaches and creatives turn their podcasts into aligned, client attracting tools through soulful strategy and intentional content. With nearly a decade of podcasting experience, Caroline is the founder of the Strategize and Shine Podcast Academy and host of Share, Strategize, and Shine. And this chat is very sweet. It's very centered on healing from growing up in a Christian or Catholic upbringing. And it's so amazing how often we keep circling back in this conversation to Mary Magdalene. And so if you're already familiar with Mary Magdalene, you're going to love this. If you're not, definitely take a listen and get to know how she inspired both of our journeys. Well, I'd like to welcome Caroline to the podcast, to the chat. And I got to know Caroline in our coven, and she has been really a good contributor in there, showing up to lives and connecting with people. But what I didn't know at first was that she actually has her own podcast academy. And when I asked people to be on my podcast, she was one of the first people to say yes. And now I know why. So we're going to get to know her a little bit today. We'll hear a little bit about her journey, her spiritual journey, her witchy journey. And then she'll also share a little tidbit of helpful information for new witches, especially witches coming from a Catholic or Christian background. So if you could start by just briefly introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about you and what makes you happy, what makes you who you are.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm Caroline. I work from home and homeschool my three beautiful daughters, raising some fierce, strong women in my house. And I own my own business, so I am a podcast strategist. But what I like to tell people that I really do is I help women who have online businesses share their voices in a way that's going to be impactful for them and for their business. So, I was actually telling somebody the other day, I feel like I've become a podcast life coach. So because inevitably when you start sharing content, all kinds of stuff pops up. So yeah, I live in Colorado. I can see the mountains every day, which brings me so much joy. I love being outside when I can. Love being with my kids. Yeah, that's what makes me tick. I have two cats, two dogs, love animals, all the things.
All right, so before we kind of learn a little bit about your witchy journey, I just would like to know, because you do so much from home, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
people that work from home or homeschool, like how do you kind of separate the space or the energy, and like how do you not go crazy in your own home because you do everything from the house?
Yeah, that has been a real challenge, especially as I've become busier and my kids have become busier. So I have a 14, 11, and 4-year-old. So I've got like one entering high school, I've got one entering middle school, and then I've got like a preschooler. And I feel like when the two olders were little, it was so much easier and so much more peaceful. And I feel like as I've gotten older, it's gotten more chaotic. So a couple of things that I really do is we have a rhythm in our house. I always tell people we don't do a schedule, we have a rhythm. And I have a rhythm in my business as well. So like I know when I'm going to work on certain things on what days. I know about what time during the day that I'm going to work. And I do try to keep them separate. If we're doing homeschool, I try to just be doing homeschool. If I'm working, I try to just be working. Um, and then beyond that, like taking time out. So I am a huge lover of incense. So I will just like, if I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, or like it's just, I'm an INFJ. If anybody knows what the Myers-Briggs is, I'm like, I'm actually quite an introvert and I get overstimulated really easily. And so I will just go light some incense and just stand near my altar. And then I actually created a mini altar in the homeschool space this last week, which has been really lovely because it's in the basement. And so now I've got like these two kind of energetic, wonderfully peaceful places I can go to. And I feel like that has just made such a difference in the energy in our home. And so, yeah, it's all about rhythm. It's all about taking care of yourself. And just a lot of fun, honestly, just having fun.
I love that. I love rhythm. And I feel like people can lend that to like their spiritual witchy practice as well, because some people will say like, I want to have a morning ritual or I want to do this, but if it's too rigid, then they lose it. Like, and so having a rhythm, I like that, especially because as witches, we like follow the moon, we follow the earth cycle. Like that's all rhythm.
Yeah, and it's funny because since I've been tuning into the cycle of the moon and that kind of stuff more, I'm actually seeing how it affects my kids and our homeschool and our home, and it's been really fascinating. So there is like a seasonality now that is kind of flowing into the work that we do here at home. And so, I was just talking to my daughter before the call about like how is our summer going to go because we've got some math to wrap up this summer. And I was like, it'll be fine. We're just gonna feel into it, you know? And I kind of laughed because I was like, Caroline, 4 or 5 years ago would have been like, no, we have to schedule it in. It has to be at a certain time. So I do love that, that journey that I've taken to just being a little bit more about rhythm and less about schedule.
I love that. I love that for parenting. I love that for work life balance, everything. Like, yeah, I'm gonna take that because I don't I have like ADHD, so schedules and I try really hard to hold the schedule, but it's not something like I'm definitely not a type A personality. So rhythm, I like that. I'm gonna take that for sure. I had a question for
Yeah.
you. What made you join our coven? Because you are in there, you've been in there a couple months now, right?
Yeah. I think it was last I joined at the end of last year. So it was like October, September, October. So I started diving into, well, where would you like me to start? Because I may have to go back a little bit. So
Go back.
I found you on
Tell us your
TikTok.
journey.
I found you on TikTok. Yeah, I found you on TikTok randomly. So I had read a book about Mary Magdalene, and it like changed my life. Like this book literally changed my life. It's called Mary Magdalene Revealed. And I started diving into like because that book is a lot about like what early Christianity could have been, and it's also a lot about like your relationship with yourself. I started digging into some of that, and so I started following people on TikTok, and you kind of popped up in my world. So I had actually been following you for a while, and every time a video of yours popped up, I just felt like a sense of peace. But I also was really confused about, where do I go? Like, how do I find people who are walking a similar path to me? And that was really why I joined, was I just wanted to be in the room where it happens, as it were, around people who were going on a similar journey. Because I think that's like been one of the hardest things the last few years for me is going through this journey of like what do I actually believe? What path am I going to follow? But feeling very alone in it. And um I had also right around the time I had read this Mary Magdalene book, I started reading a lot of books about witches and feminism and the history of witches. And there were a couple books I read where they would talk about coven and community and how important that was. And I was like, how do I find that here? Like I'm not tapped into that in my local area. And so finding your coven online was like it was so amazing. And I love it because now I have a place to go and I'm not having to like Google or like watch videos on TikTok and be like, what is this? What does this mean? What does this look like? So, yeah, that's a short version of how I found it.
So how did you find the Mary Magdalene Revealed by Megan Watterson? Like how did that book get into your hands? Do you remember?
I don't remember honestly. So I have been questioning the women's place in religion for a very long time. I was raised Catholic. My husband and I are both what we like to call cradle Catholics. And he went to Catholic school. I did not. But we have always questioned. I mean, I took religious studies in college, and I remember just falling in love with Buddhism, like just this idea of reaching for enlightenment. And I went to school in a very religious community. It was not a religiously oriented school, but there was a lot of recruiting going on campus, and it just was a very hard time for me because I was questioning a lot. I felt like it didn't fit. I've never really felt like I fit in the Catholic Church, to be honest. I've always felt out of place. And when our daughter started getting older and the world started revealing itself a little bit and how it treats women, I really started to question if that was the environment I wanted them in. And so I think somewhere along those lines, that led me to the Mary Magdalene book. I cannot even tell you how I got there. I think the universe was like, you need this book. And that's because I don't even remember like buying it, to be honest. But I started reading it and I was like, yes, like every page I was like, yes, yes. Yeah, this is what I've been feeling, this disconnect from the church. Um, and I have always been the kind of person who felt better in nature with my feet in the grass and my eyes to the mountains than I ever did inside of a building. So, yeah, it just seemed like a natural progression for me. And that book really cracked open something in me that was like waiting to be cracked open.
So did you use did you say cradle Catholic? So the term.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I always
Yeah,
say I was born Catholic because you were truly born Catholic. It's not like,
literally.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that that book brought you to like goddesses and feminism because I think that's the intention of her book. Like she's a really wonderful writer. And I remember I also took a world religions course and I remember like learning about these other gospels and being like, wait a minute. So there's
Yeah.
more. You know what I mean? I was like
Yeah.
19. I was like in shock. I already was a witch at that point, but I did not know that there was these other gospels that got left out. And then I kind of went on a hunt for Mary Magdalene. It took me to the Getty Museum in LA, and there was like all these paintings of Mary Magdalene. She'd be shown with like a skull or like the alabaster jar. I read The Woman with the Alabaster
Yeah.
Jar. It was just like it was very like it's almost thrilling to be like, I mean, like reading Megan Watterson's book and reading other books about Mary Magdalene, it's like my heart would speed up. Like my body was like,
Me
yeah, that's
too.
the truth. Yeah, right.
Yeah. The other thing that I think has been so huge, so I have my oldest daughter wants to be um an astronaut, and not in the like I want to
Not
be an
like Katy
astronaut. Like
Perry.
she's serious. Oh, sorry, say that again. My
But not
computer
like
cut out.
Katy Perry.
Not like Katy Perry. No, she wants to be an actual astronaut. And she has always questioned. Um, always questioned. I mean, we would read the Bible when she was little, and she would be like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. What about the Big Bang? Where are the dinosaurs? Like, she was that kind of kid. And, having someone like that in your life who's like, I mean, she was like 7 years old and she's challenging everything I've been raised believing, but I actually was challenging it myself, but very quietly. And so when I read that Mary Magdalene book, it was like a validation of the challenges that I had been bringing, like what is this book exactly? Like, is this actually history? Like, there were all these things that I was asking and yeah, and knowing that there were other books out there. Like there's another one that I'm really fascinated by. I'd love to learn more about, but she talks about Thecla a lot in the Mary Magdalene book, who traveled with Paul and who was basically she's not allowed sainthood because she baptized herself. And like, you'd read that and you're just like, what the heck? And they left her book out as well. And so it just, yeah, it really was my daughter pushing me because I could see this very smart, independent soul. And she's going into a world where she's going to have to fight for everything she wants. And I was like, I've got to give her the tools. She's not getting the tools where we were at. And that really was the push I needed, was her. And then, of course, that book. So,
And then were you homeschooling the whole time with her? Or was that like a change that you made?
yes. No, we were homeschooling the whole time because I had felt like, again, so this just cracks me up when I think about it. We had put her in a Catholic preschool when she was 4. Um, and her experience there was already so negative. And I was like, there's got to be something better. There's got to be something different. And that's when I fell into homeschooling. I really wanted to give my kids something unique and different that I had had. I had gone to public school. My husband had gone to Catholic school. We were like, we don't want either of these, and nothing against either of those, but we just wanted something unique and a unique experience for them. But I think what's so wonderful about the homeschooling is it has allowed us the opportunity to dive into a lot of these topics. And like when we read history, we read it from a very critical eye and we question things and we look things up and that too I think has really cracked open this um feminist worldview that I've developed over the last few years. So yeah.
So I often think like that working with like goddesses and doing witchy things leads someone to a more feminist point of view. And it's interesting that you say that because some people don't like that word. But I always think about I took lit theory in when I was a literature major, and we read Donna Haraway, who is a feminist, and she said that a feminist could be of any gender, and a feminist loves Mother Earth, loves animals, and works with all people. And I've always taken that as my definition. Like a real feminist isn't like only wanting women to do well. It's like we want everyone to do well,
Right.
including the earth. Like we just care about everyone, humanity, the earth, the collective. Like we want it all to heal. We want it all to be better. And I love too that you're talking about like this Mary Magdalene as a gateway too, because like growing up Catholic, it feels even with Mother Mary, it just feels so masculine. Like I remember learning I couldn't be a priest. I was like, I'm going to be a
Right.
priest when I grow up. And because I've always been very spiritual. And then my grandfather was like, oh no, you could be a nun, but you can't be a priest. And I was like, oh. And then it's like, I would pray to Mother Mary more than I prayed to anybody else. So I just felt more comfortable with this one woman that I was taught about and I was allowed to pray to. So yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so you read the book, you started getting on TikTok, you started questioning, and then what happened after that?
I think it really was diving into the history of witches. So I read Pam Grossman's book. I read the French writer. I can't think of the name of her book. Um I feel like I should look it up because I don't want to be. I read a few books all about like the history of witches, the history of the witch trials, and not just like the witch trials here, but like the ones that happened in Europe. And I have always, so I love history. I'm a big, like, I should have been a historian. I should have majored in history because I just love history so much. I mean, I remember going to Scotland and seeing Hadrian's Wall and being like just mad. Like I still get mad that they pushed the Celts, off their land. Like I still think about those things. And when I started digging into the history, it felt like I was almost being called to honor the women that had gone through all of that. Like when you really start to study what those women went through, but not just what they went through, but who they were before all of that happened and like what we've lost. And I think that is what really radicalized me, honestly, because I felt like I have never felt like I fit in. Never in my whole life. Like when I was in high school, I didn't fit in. When I was in junior high, I didn't fit in. I didn't fit into the ballet world. I was a ballet dancer for many years, was a ballet pedagogy major. I didn't fit in. I have always felt out of place. When I married my husband, I didn't fit into his group of friends. Like I have always felt out of place. And when I started reading this stuff, it was almost like I was finding my place. Like I was like carrying something with me that had been lost for generations or something. I can't even explain it. I felt like I was being called and led very specifically to become a witch. And when I first started like I dabbling or whatever, those first steps you take, like it felt like a homecoming. It felt like I feel more spiritual now than I did all those years of being Catholic. I feel more connected to myself and to like what I want to be and how I engage with the world than I did. And the interesting thing about all of this is right before I'm pretty sure before I got the Mary Magdalene book, I had like a complete crisis. Like I didn't know who I was, I didn't know what I was doing, nothing felt right. And we had kind of left the church at that point. I put quotation marks around that because it's not like we like wrote a letter and said, "Hey, we're leaving." We just kind of like gradually happened, and we weren't going to church anymore. And I remember just feeling so disconnected. Like I hadn't felt connected before, but I felt even more disconnected now. And I almost felt like I was doing a disservice to my kids. Like I was like, man, they're not going to have any spirituality. Like, is that okay? And when all of this started like popping up in my world, it really did feel like a homecoming. And even my oldest daughter, who is like the most skeptical person on the planet, like she will do stuff with me. She likes to do oracle cards. She likes crystals. She likes to hang out at the altar with me. And it's been really cool seeing her form that connection as well. She's out of all of our kids, she's the one who remembers the Catholic Church the most. And she liked ritual. She liked going, she liked the ritual of it all. And so bringing that back into our house and the way that we have has been really special. But yeah, I mean, I really felt like I was called to this. I felt like there was something out there that was like, you need to reconnect with who women were meant to be. You need to reconnect with who you were meant to be. You know, yeah, it felt bigger than me for sure.
Well, I think you're right. Like I became a witch in the 90s and it was still very like subculture and I just kept it hidden for a long time. And then my one friend's like, no, girl, you need to go on Witch Talk. I'm like, what is that? And I went on there and I'm like, oh, people are allowed to be witches now. Like, we're not going to get made fun of and like run out of our neighborhoods. Like, I really had to deal with some witch wound stuff. But I saw like all these people just like truly being called, truly interested, truly like wanting to learn more. And it was amazing to me. And it really, I think, I mean, if we look at the state of the world at the moment, like we're going through a huge change. I don't care who you voted for or what country you live in. There is
Yeah.
a huge change going on and it can't be denied. And it's like women need to be part of that. And I think a lot of times, like in order to really heal our full femininity, we have to heal that witch wound. We have to like come to terms with that word. That's why I use the word all the time. It's like a reclamation, instead of being like, I'm sure we've all like had the family members like, oh yeah, that woman, she's a real witch, and they use it instead of bitch. And it's like,
Yeah.
like it's like we need to take it back. So I think you're right. I think there is like a mass calling right now. Like it's people are waking up, women especially. People, anybody can be a witch, as I've said before, but particularly women are like waking up to this like, wait a minute, like none of this adds up. There must
Yeah.
be more.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I love that you brought up the word witch because as someone who has come from a Catholic background, like if you read in the catechism, it talks about things specifically, like it specifically mentions tarot cards and how those are not, you should not mess with those. And I think that has been like the most interesting part of this journey for me is like getting over some of those deep-seated fears that were planted in me by,
Mhm.
I don't know, a patriarchal organization. Like what I have come to realize is that a lot of what happens inside organized religion is for control. And that has been like so incredibly freeing, like being like, they don't control me anymore. you know what? I have a tarot deck now. I have not burst into flames. Like, and which that is something that I think when I first joined the coven, there was actually a conversation, what do you call yourself? And I said, I don't know if I'm comfortable enough yet to call myself a witch. And my kids they asked me, they're like, "Do you call yourself a witch now?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know." And that's something I'm still grappling with because it is a word that, for so many centuries has had such a negative connotation. And I think that was a thing that was so eye-opening to me when I started actually educating myself on what witchcraft was, on what being a witch actually meant, and realizing how much beauty and goodness is in it when all I had been taught was how dark and evil it was. Like, I think back to high school. I loved your podcast episode where you talked about your journey because there were so many things I connected with. But I remember back in high school, there was a girl who was Wicca, and she would bring some of her books to school, and I would always kind of sit off and like, be like, "Oh, what is that? Oh, but that's evil. I can't, I gotta be careful. It's evil." And but I was always interested in it. Like I was always kind of looking over her shoulder, going, "What is that?" Trying to peek over. And so it was your podcast episode reminded me of that experience and being like, "What is that? That's so interesting and fascinating," yet being so scared to dive into it. And now being where I am and, I'm 41 now and I'm like, whatever, like, it's time to embrace my true authentic self. And I'm like, yeah, bring it. Let me learn about everything. And the more I have read, the more I have learned, the more I realize just how beautiful and good and connected to the good things in this world witchcraft really is. And and what's so cool to me is how it can be uniquely yours. So like I mean, I have Mary Magdalene all over my altar. Um, I feel so connected to her as a woman who was misunderstood, whose story was told incorrectly, who was made the villain in a religion, and I feel so connected to her. And I definitely think that she was brought into my life for a reason. And so, it's just because I became a witch doesn't mean that I had to get rid of her because, that's part of Christianity or anything. So it's been such a incredible thing for me to go through. And I think it's been incredible for my kids to witness that like it's not as cut and dry as we all thought it was, right? Like it can be a mix of things. And yeah, I love that. And I think that's been so freeing for me in this stage of my life.
Well, I love that you're open with it with your kids and how you mentioned your 14-year-old is the most skeptic, but also kind of the most interested because it's the same in my house. My 14-year-old is, if you look at her astrology chart, it's like skeptic, skeptic. I mean, there's like so many flags for her to just do science. She's always been science minded. And she has her own tarot cards and she's learning. She enjoys it. And she recently did a spell and had like really good results very quickly. And I think it
Oh,
really
wow.
it confirmed for her that okay, my mom's not totally crazy, right? Like she
Yeah.
actually like she knows what she's talking about. It was like this kind of a bonding moment and it was yeah, it was very cool. And so I love that you're open with them. Was it like hard for you to be open with them or to like invite them into that world?
It was at first, and it also wasn't because I feel like my purpose as a mother of three girls is is to raise some pretty strong, like I always say, like I'm raising some pretty strong, fierce women. And like I feel like that's not by accident. Like I think I'm preparing them for a world in which they are gonna have to fight for everything they want. More so than like I ever felt, or, I don't even know. And so it was really important to me when I started this journey that I had conversations with them about why I was doing what I was doing, where it was coming from. I listened to a lot of the books on audio book, and so they would listen with me. They listened to the BBC Witch podcast with me. Um, yeah, and so it just was like I tried to make them a part of the experience, and I've always said to them, like, you do not have to follow this path. But if you want to, like, here's why. I am doing it. And I mean, and they love it. They have connected. My middle has connected so much with it. We went to our first metaphysical store here in town a couple weeks ago, and the energy in that store was so amazing. I have never walked into a space and just been like, ah, like it just felt so good. But when we walked out, it was funny because even my kids were like, gosh, it felt so much better in there than it does out here. Like they're starting to tune into that kind of thing. And it's been really neat. We did a house cleansing the other day. We've just had a really hard couple of months, and I was like, you know what we need to do? We need to cleanse this entire space. I had just taken your protection class, so I was like, okay, we've got to put some crystals in some corners, and they participated, and and they were part of it, and they thought it was really cool, and so that's been really neat. And the funny thing about it too is so I am still a little quiet about it. Like whenever people come over, I put all my witchy books in the cabinet. I don't take anything off my altar, but I do like hide my witchy books that are sitting out on the coffee table. I'm still nervous. There's still a part of me that's nervous, right? Because this has been so ingrained. I'm breaking lots of, stuff that's been ingrained in me as a person. And what's funny is my 14-year-old is like, why are you hiding it? Just be who you are. Like, just do it. She's so funny. So she's been like my little cheerleader, just, it doesn't matter. Who cares? Like, who's gonna say anything? Whatever. Like, so that's been really cool to see that, I was not that way at 14. I was terrified to be who I was. And so just to see that my journey reflected in her eyes is that, oh, my mom is stepping into who she is, and I'm gonna be a cheerleader for that. That has been really cool. I think that when we are open with our kids and we can share these journeys that we go on, I've been in therapy the last few years. Like I've been on a healing journey, I feel like for the last 5 years or so, a bit like a big healing journey as a human. And I've been really open with them about that. And I think it's just made them better people. I think it's made them feel like, we can talk to mom about anything. Like, I want that stuff to be normal because it was so unnormal for my generation. Going to high school, like you said, in the 90s, I mean, none of us were in therapy. None of us were talking about like how we felt. None of us were in tune with our energy and how it was affecting things around us, those kinds of things. And so I think that it's a very conscious thing that my husband and I have made a choice that we were going to do things differently. And to see the fruits of that as they're getting older is pretty cool.
Yeah, it seems like you're giving them a gift. I always think about like when you become a parent, conscious parent, it's like you try to think about what you would have liked to have as a child and you give that,
Yeah.
right? Like you would have liked to have honesty and you would have liked to have options. And I love that. And then, so it seems like the path has kind of affected like your home life and you work with, is it mainly women or like only women that you work with in your podcast coaching?
Yeah, so it's only women. Wasn't originally by choice. It just happened that way. And then now that's just what I say is that I only work with women. But yeah, it's definitely affected the work that I do for sure.
Yeah, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so when I started really working on my throat chakra, it was really interesting because I realized very quickly that the thing that I was experiencing, like not being able to speak my truth, all of these things. So let me back up just a minute. Since I was little, so I mentioned that I didn't feel like I fit in. I also have never really felt like I could voice what I wanted to voice, whether that was like an opinion on something or my feelings. I've always felt like I've got to keep it inside. And before I started podcasting, I was not a very confident speaker. I would not have been able to sit here and even have this conversation with you, Jenny. Like 10 years ago, I could not sit down and be confident in what I was saying. And podcasting has really given me that. Well, I noticed that over the last few years, really since the pandemic, because during the pandemic we had like a major surge of podcasters. And I realized that one of the things I was starting to do was actually coach people on how to be confident in their content and what they were sharing. And I was like, this is so interesting. And so it was really fascinating to me when I started a couple of years ago, there was like a big shift in the industry. AI came on the market. I went from having an agency where I was editing like 20 to 30 clients a week to only five. And I was like, man, what does the future of my business look like? And so I started working with a business coach on my purpose. And it was so funny because what came out of that was that my purpose wasn't to edit podcasts. It was to give women a space where they felt like they could be seen and heard and work on sharing their voice confidently. And I started to see all the threads in my life that have been like pieced together, from being a child and not wanting to upset anybody to being in the ballet world and being walked all over and just letting them to, the jobs that I've had, relationships, there's been so many moments in my life where people have literally stepped on me and I didn't speak up. And now I'm like, that's not what happens anymore. Like I try to speak up quite often. And so yeah, so the point of my business has changed so much. Really what I do now is I am a strategist, so I'm helping people create podcasts that work for their business, but we also work through a lot of blocks. Why are you having trouble creating this content? Why are you not confident in your voice? What is the message you really want to share, and how can we build a podcast around that? That has become a huge piece of what I do. And it's so impactful because when I work with women, maybe they have something really unique they want to share and they come to me and they're like, I'm just not sure how to piece this together. And that's where I come in. And it's been really cool to see like their vision, but also their voice become clearer as we work together. And it's really funny because in the last couple weeks, I've been working on my marketing and my branding and just like I want my voice, like the way I write and the copy on my website and everything to reflect what I'm saying right now to you. And it was really funny because I was talking to Chat GPT like I do and was like trying to work on some copy, and ChatGPT came up with a new phrase that I am like adopting, and it just goes with all the work that I've been doing. But it was like, you're not just a podcast coach, you're a voice keeper. And I was like, okay, ChatGPT, like, yes, voice keeper. I mean, that hit me so hard because I feel like that is my purpose, is to amplify women's voices. And so I've changed on my website. You can see it now. So like even before we started recording this, you were reading my bio and I was thinking in my brain, I was like, oh, I need to give her the updated one where it has voice keeper and stuff like that in it, because it's like something has just exploded out of me in the last couple of weeks. And something has really shifted in how I show up in the world. And yeah, and that voice keeper energy, that is what I'm leaning into.
That gave me full body chills. Like that's
Me
amazing.
too.
Like voice keeper. And then I love too that it's share, strategize, and shine. Because what you're doing is you're not just giving like dry business advice. Like you're helping the person find like their inner light, right? To share. Because that's what it is like that's what blocks are. They block that light and block us from really expressing ourselves. So that's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
There's something really amazing that I have discovered about, like, whether you're a business owner or not, just creating any kind of content and sharing it, it like really is difficult for a lot of us and it makes us feel vulnerable. And I think with Instagram and TikTok, we feel like we need to show up in a certain way. Like there's an aesthetic, there's a way I mean, I have been struggling with this for the last year. I've been working on like my Instagram strategy and trying to get in front of more people. And it's just not coming from an authentic place. It's coming from a very like, this is what I should do kind of place. And so when we rebranded not that long ago, and I wanted to include like mountains, light, I wanted those, and my wonderful ops manager, who's also a designer, came up with that. And that really was like what led us to start using the word shine in a lot of things because I think that especially as women, so often we are pushed to dim our light. And like that is what I have felt my entire life. Like I that my light has been dimmed. And when I started reading about witches and the witch trials, that's what it felt like to me was this huge dimming of lights. And that it just bled into my business branding. Like I feel like all of this has happened at the same time. So like, at the same moment that I started, like I read that Mary Magdalene book, we were rebranding. I was changing the name of my podcast. I've changed how I work with people, and it's really all connected to this journey that I've been on.
Well, I love that too because that's the story of Mary Magdalene. Her light was dimmed. Like
Yes.
she was like an apostle, and they were like, no, she's a prostitute. Sorry, like we just can't.
Yeah. I know one of my favorite stories of hers is in the book of Mary Magdalene. There's a story about her telling the other disciples about what Jesus told her. This is after Jesus has died, and she's telling them stuff. And I'm pretty sure Peter, right? Peter, the rock of the church, was like, you silly woman, no. Why would he share that with you and not with us? And then one of the other disciples was like, how dare you speak to her like that? Like she was his favorite. And I just love that passage because I feel like it literally represents all women everywhere. So often we're in a room where we're being told, no, that's not what it is. And and that's the thing that's so magical about podcasting too, is it is like it is not like social media where people are trolling you and leaving negative comments. It is literally like this thing that you own that you get to put out into the world and it's there to create connection and engagement and community in some ways. And that's why like if somebody ever comes to me and they're like, I'm thinking about starting a podcast, I'm like, do it because it is such a great way to share and to get to know your voice and what you stand for. Like that stuff becomes so much clearer. There's nothing like sitting behind a microphone and talking about what you believe for 20 minutes to an hour that makes it clearer for you. And so, yeah, I just always think about that story because I feel like sometimes this is my way of being like, nope, I'm going to share anyways. And that's what she did. The story is that she went to France and where she is greatly revered in the south of France. They still to this day like keep the cave that she lived in sacred and all of that kind of thing. And so, find your don't let them dim your light. Like find a place to share your light. I think that's so important.
That's beautiful. I asked you originally to share some kind of witchy tip, but I feel like that's it right there. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's interesting because this whole conversation has constantly gone back to Mary Magdalene in a good way. And like, it's her story is our story. Like, that's what we're talking
Mm.
about. And I just think that's
Yeah.
like, amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So, do
I
you
love
have
that so much.
any other little last things you'd like to share before we say goodbye and let our listeners move on with their day?
No, I do have a funny story now that I'm thinking about it. So my birthday was recent. I had a recent birthday, and I did a little birthday spell, and listen, I'm still learning, candle magic and stuff like that. And I I left my candle going, and I had a piece of rose quartz next to the candle, and I left and I told my husband, I'm leaving the candle burning. Can you just watch it? Well, it burned my altar and it exploded my piece of rose quartz. And I was like, okay, what does this all mean? And it's really funny because there was a part of me that was like, oh, Caroline, gosh, you should know better. You didn't set it up right. You didn't do it right. Like I wanted to criticize myself. And then so my birthday was March 27th. We're recording this on April 16th. So like in this month, there has been so much transformation and realization. And I honestly think that candle burning that ring into my altar and exploding that rose quartz was a sign that this is going to be a year of major transformation. So, I think as beginner witches, we can be really hard on ourselves, like that we're not doing things right. And I know that for me, that's exactly what I was doing in that moment. And now I look back on it and I'm like, I am so glad that that happened because it literally was like the start of something kind of amazing. So, I don't know if that story is helpful to anybody, but I just thought that was funny. Also, be careful of your candles.
No, I think, well, I also think about the symbolism of like rose quartz, right? It's so deeply tied with the heart chakra. So it's like explosive
Yeah,
change, heart led, which is exactly what you're doing in your work and doing in your homeschooling and
yeah,
doing in your own life. It's all like heart led. So no, I think that's amazing. And that is true. Like, yes, please always be careful with your candles, but I always read the candle. The candle goes out, why? If there's not like someone blowing on it, like
yeah,
or let me look at how the glass burned, or it definitely if something explodes, that's something you should definitely like find out why. And sometimes, like you said, you don't know really why till like a while later. But always take note, right? That's the lesson in that. Like do it with
yeah,
intention, always take note and trust that it's how it should be, right?
right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. I appreciate your time and energy. And yeah, please, we can find Caroline at wildhomepodcasting.com. Check her out. I'll put links here on the YouTube video. And you can also go to the podcast website for her links as well. But I really enjoyed chatting with you, and I thank you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed sharing today. This meant a lot.
I hope you enjoyed my chat with Caroline Hall today. And you can find her at Wild Home Podcasting on Instagram or wildhomepodcasting.com to connect with her and learn a little bit more about her.